In the next episode of Painting and Travel, Sarah visits the Florida Agricultural Museum, touring a 100-year-old farmhouse. Roger, using acrylics, paints the Clark House homestead.
Hello, and thanks for being with us at the Florida Agricultural Museum in Palm Coast, where with the help of historian James Fisk, we'll tour the Clark House and grounds to see what daily chores took place to keep a Florida farm family thriving. And this front view is the one Roger will paint for you.
This is a photograph that Sarah took, and I really liked it a lot, but I'm going to change the composition slightly to improve it somewhat. I'll show you a side-to-side comparison here to show you the differences. In the original photograph, the man was right down in this area, and I wanted to emphasize him a bit more. So I made the man slightly larger, so his head comes above this roof, so he is more predominant in the composition. That's really the main thing I did. A few other smaller things. This gate was closed. I opened that to give it a more welcoming look. I've also taken this photograph and I've overexposed it. So I have the original photograph and the overexposed photograph. And that way I can see some of the details in these dark areas where I couldn't see any information before. That way, if I want to add some of these things like the windows and things, I will have that overexposed photo to use as reference. But primarily, I'll use the original photograph. On my palette, I have black, titanium white, ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, cadmium yellow, Indian yellow, alizarin crimson, cadmium red, burnt umber, burnt sienna, yellow ochre, chromium oxide green, and sap green. Quite a few colors today. I may not use them all, but they're out there if I need them. And I have an assortment of brushes today. I have some flats, a couple rounds, and a couple of fan brushes. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tone my board just to get rid of this white up here. I'm going to spray it with my sprayer, just a little bit of water, take some burnt sienna, and just squirt a little bit on there. I could put it on there with a brush, but I found this is really the easiest and quickest way to do this. So I just apply that on there, and my pencil marks still show up beneath this. Squirt a little more on there. Now I do need to spray the board with a little bit of water before I do this so it spreads out nice and evenly. Now often I start with my darks and work towards my lights, and I guess I'll do that again today. But really, you know, that's a lot to do with preference and a lot to do with the subject itself. But I guess today I will start with the darks back here in the building. A little bit of burnt umber and ultramarine blue. That always makes a good dark. Acrylics don't cover nearly as well as oil paints. And many times I do have to go over these areas. That just is not covering. If that were oil paints, that would cover very well, but it just doesn't in acrylics. So I will have to go over these a second time. But that's just part of the nature of these acrylics. Now, a lot of this drawing I'm going to lose in here, I know that, but that's sort of the way that just goes. But I like to have as accurate a drawing as I can because it familiarizes me with the whole overall look of the painting. Here I have a small container of water so I can dip in and thin paints. And down below here, this is where I wash my brushes. Can't really say where the best possible place to start on this painting is. There's so much going on in this painting with the figure, the landscape, the architectural aspect of it. So at this point, working from dark to light, it's not necessarily that important, I guess. The important part is just getting everything covered to start with and just not leave anything untouched. So I'm just going to cover this with a thin application of paint. Now, I've always loved painting these old tin roofs. They're actually galvanized metal roofs, but they call them tin roofs. And even though this roof here is not rusty, I think in the painting here, I am going to give it a little more character and give it a little more rust. But I'm going to start out by giving it this thin coat of cerulean blue. And I'll go into that a little bit later as to why. Well, let me see, this is chromium oxide green, some cerulean blue. I'll just put a thin wash here of that. I'm not trying to be stingy with the paint here. I'm just trying to apply it rather thin so I can work up to thicker areas and really not lose my drawing. And I'm certainly not worried about putting in little tiny brush strokes here. It's just a matter of getting this whole painting covered with something of the approximate value and color. And then I can build on that. And this will dry very fast. Some darker areas back here with the trees. And there's another small barn over here. So I'll cut around that. Well, by putting this burnt sienna on here, what it's done is it's given me a middle tone. So it's not real light, not real dark, it's middle tone. Then I can work from there to go darker and lighter. And I don't have to really worry about putting on the middle tones yet because I already get started with the middle tone. That kind of helps. I'm going to put the sky in next. And because I don't want this sky very dominant, I'm going to take white and black and just make a very sort of a dull sky. So I don't want a lot of interest going up in this area because the interest really is here with this man and the building. So if I were to put a really blue, bright sky in there, it would kind of take away from the kind of steal the thunder away from the real center of interest. And again, this is just real thin. Another reason for putting these on thin to begin with is if I need to make changes, it's a lot easier to make changes with thicker paint over thinner paint. And the fact that this will dry so fast, I can make any changes I want in the color and the value. And often, this burnt sienna will come through in the final painting. And since it's an earth color, it just sort of makes sense to start out with a warm earth color, you know, burnt umber, burnt sienna, that sort of thing, because that's really what's underneath all this. And up here, any burnt sienna that really shows through in the end painting will just help to harmonize the whole piece. Well, I was afraid I was going to lose the drawing on this fence, and sure enough, I am. But having put it in there to begin with, I got an idea of where all that goes. So, and of course, I have my reference photo here too. Now, I have not used any white at all in this painting except in the sky. So all these colors are a bit transparent. Some burnt sienna. This roof back here really is rusty, as well as this one here. Here, I'll drop that tree trunk in there. I believe that's a Florida pine. Well, a smaller brush might be a thing to pick up now. And I'll block in the man here. And let me take a little ruler. That way I can steady my hand and I won't have to put my hand on the paint here. Now let's go down and put a thin coat on his arm here, just to block that in. So I'm going to pick up some white now because that shirt's very light. And let's take some cadmium yellow, maybe a bit of yellow ochre, maybe a touch of cerulean blue to cut that back. I'm going to work from some dark to light here on these passages. I always want to leave enough room for my real bright highlights and accents. So I don't want to get extremely bright too quick. Now this was an overcast day when Sarah took this photograph, so I'm not getting any harsh shadows here. All right, that's pass number 1.
I've heard this referred to as a cracker house, and I noticed it has a nice big front porch. Is that part of the design, and how did this get that name?
Okay, yes ma'am. Yeah, the cracker house has always had a wide porch on it. And the term cracker house, the term cracker actually came from back during the territorial period of Florida, from 1821 to 1845. The term cracker came from the pioneers who were rounding up the free-ranging cattle. And in order to do that, they had to use whips, and cracking the whips in the air is where the term came from.
Okay, so the cracker house then was occupied by people that had cattle. Well, I'd like to go inside.
Sure.
It's very cozy in here, and I guess this is the all-purpose room.
There was very little staying inside the house. A lot of the work got done out on the porch and, of course, in the kitchen. This was the eating place and the sleeping place.
And I suppose that this room is pretty breezy because of the way this cracker house is built. You've got your nice big front porch, and then you have the uncovered porch in the back.
Or what they call a dog trot. And that's where the dogs would hang out, especially dinner time. They smelled the food. They'd be up there just wanting to get some scraps. But it's also elevated off the ground. So during the summertime, this stays very cool because the hot air from me is rising up, and there's air vents between the walls and the roof. You've got the windows open, and then you've got the elevation off of the floor. So you've got flow-through ventilation through here all the time. And actually during the summertime, this does stay somewhat cooler than outside, even when it's 98 degrees.
Well, that's certainly important here in Florida. I noticed that in this room, it looks like maybe the woman of the house does quite a bit of work also. There's is that a loom?
Oh, yes.
So she's working on producing some fabric.
Yes, ma'am.
And now this would be for wool?
Correct.
And so I guess a sheep would be
right.
part of the stock. And also this chest, I suppose a Hope chest would store the winter blankets. And there are no closets in the house. And then there are a couple of bedrooms.
There's no bathroom in here except for the chamber pots at night. And then the first thing in the morning, the youngest of the children would have to take the chamber pots out to the outhouse and dump those. You use the chamber pots because at night you can't see anything. There's no electricity, and you don't know what's outside the house and beyond the fence. So that's why the chamber pots were used until in the morning.
So it's a safety measure not to go outside when
Absolutely.
it's dark. I suppose a few pieces of furniture were store-bought, but others were not, like maybe the table?
Table was definitely handmade. A lot of the furniture back then, a lot of it would have been handmade because there weren't a lot of stores nearby. In fact, the nearest of the stores would be 20 miles away.
Yeah, and no delivery truck.
No delivery truck.
Get that
Absolutely
horse and
not.
buggy and
Right.
make a special trip. I've taken a special interest in this rug. What's it made of?
Okay. Yes, ma'am. This is a cowhide from a cracker cow. The cracker cow actually came over here 500 years ago with the Spaniards. In 1521, Don Juan Ponce de Leon brought the very first cattle over here from Spain. He brought with him 7 head of cattle, and he landed on the other side of what was called La Florida.
And the cracker cow's from Spain. And then has he bred with other local cows?
Eventually, yes, but right now, one thing that we have done here at the Florida Agriculture Museum is keep 3 or 4 of the cracker cows on the farm, because we want to definitely tell their story.
So they're quite pure bred. Along with the cracker cows, how about the pigs?
Well, the pigs were also brought over by the Spanish, and unfortunately, the hogs that we have around here right now, and we do actually have a wild hog here on the property. When he came here, a lady found him alongside the road. The lady got a hold of him, took him home, kept him for a couple weeks, brought him out here, and he'll live his life out here. But that's what a wild pig looks like. These are descendants of the pigs that came from Spain, and they're an invasive species. They are definitely considered an invasive species, and they were brought over by the Spaniards as well, for food.
With good intentions.
With good intentions, for feed.
But
for food,
they adapted too well.
Too well.
We'll take a peek in the bedroom areas, which are very small. And we'll pick up our tour from here next time in part 2 of the Clark House.
So now I'll go back and give it a second pass. And again, it really doesn't matter where I start. I guess I'll start down here with the grass again. Now that everything is covered and blocked in, now it gives me something to build on. Chromium oxide green, some cadmium yellow, and maybe a touch of burnt sienna. And this is where the colors can start to become richer and darker. Scrubbing this as I'm doing it will leave the impression of some grass here in texture, as opposed if I tried to smooth that out. Cerulean blue, some white. See, at this point, I'm starting to use white quite a bit. I really like these old rusty roofs. Although, like I said, this one is not rusty. I'm going to make it rusty. Let's jump back to the overalls. See, even a second coat of these acrylics, especially on a smooth board like masonite, doesn't cover all that well. Let's go back to this little shed here. Some burnt sienna, and I'll intensify the color on that roof. And I know I need to get this darker in here, but I think I've hesitated to do that because I know I'm going to lose all my drawing of that fence. Burnt umber, yellow ochre. And I'll put in some of these darker areas of his shirt. Right under his hat here is in shadow. In fact, almost all of his face is in shadow, but not quite all of it. With my white and black one more time, we'll work more on the sky. That's just black and white there. This really had a nice effect with that burnt sienna coming through. It gave it a little bit of warmth. So I want the sky to be flat. So I'll put some burnt sienna back in the mix here. And I'll warm that up some. Boy, these acrylics do dry awfully fast. If I'm outdoors painting and it's at all windy and breezy, they dry in just really a matter of seconds. One thing I can do is use my spray bottle here. I can give that a little spray. And that way I can blend these colors easier. Here, now I have a nice flat sky. The reason I want it flat is I want some eye relief from all the texture that's in the rest of the painting. So having the flat sky will solve that issue. And I'm not sure that's the right color and value yet. As I work on this painting, I may feel like I have to go back and change that again. Now these rusty roofs are interesting to me because even the rusty roof will have a lot of influence from the sky, which is generally lighter and bluer. And even though I have a sort of a gray sky, it's a cool look. So that's why I put this cool color on this roof to begin with. And of course in the reference photograph, that's certainly the way it looks. But even a really rusty roof like one back here sort of gives this roof a more convincing look. Now with my opaque paints with cerulean blue and white, I'm going to put these different panels on the roof. And I can still see my drawing through there just slightly. All right, now I have that sort of a sky color on there. Let that dry a moment or two and we'll put the rust on there. Now, just for fun, let's go back and work on his face. So, maybe burnt umber, ultramarine blue, get that dark, warm color going here. More burnt umber than ultramarine blue. Get the underside of his hat, which is really dark. But it is definitely a warm color there. Oh, let's get the headband. And I'm going to pick up some of this cerulean blue that I used on the roof here and a touch of yellow ochre. And let's put that beard in here. Well, it's coming, this all just takes some time. And let's put his nose right here. And let's put his mouth in there. This is real small. This is where a nice new brush really pays off. So now's a good time to change over to my photograph that is overexposed, and I will do that. And this way I can see the detail in here. And although I may not put it all in, or at least I know where some of that is now, with the other photograph, it just wasn't visible. Well, this is very dark in here still, and it's still sort of warm, so I'll just pick up a bunch of colors here, make sort of a neutral color, and I'll indicate a few of these windows, doors, etc. And we have the door over here. Let me see, the door is right in the middle, so it's right about here. Now for some rust on that roof. And I'm going to spray my painting here, just so this paint will flow on easier. And I'll drag some of this burnt sienna down on these panels. And some of this cerulean blue is going to show through, which is that influence from the sky. And now that's the top part of that done, and we'll extend these out down here. With more burnt sienna, I'll load my brush up some. I'll make some of these darker, just here and there. See how that cerulean blue makes a nice influence on that roof? I'll just put in some detail here and there. I don't want everyone to look exactly the same, so I will put some of these dark patches here and there, but not everywhere. So with some white, mix a little brown with that. This painting does have a lot of detail in there, and that's kind of what makes this painting, but really to get the basics down first is very important, like all these big areas. Go back to the blue jeans. Really now it's only starting to cover really well. I think I need to clean my palette. I'll take my spray bottle, Spray that a little. And with a razor blade, clean this palette off so I can get a fresh start. I'll put a few more touches on James here. Don't need too much, just a touch here and there. A few highlights on his cheeks. And I'll drop down to his overalls and put a few details in here. There's a lot of details in this painting. And a few highlights on these small buttons. There we go. Now on the side of his shirt, it's getting lit by the sky a lot because this is an overcast day. So I'm mixing up some blue color here, and I'm just putting some touches of cool colors on his shirt. Even though it's a yellow shirt, the sky is influencing this quite a bit. So I'm putting some touches of this cool bluish color right on the edge of his shirt. I'm going to drop down to the grass one more time. Put some burnt sienna in there. I think I'll spray this too. There, that just helps this paint flow so much easier. So with the side of my brush here, just going to put another layer on here until I get it the right value and color that I think is appropriate. I may use a fan brush on this too a little bit later.
This stage of the painting is where Roger will continue next time in part 2 of the Clark house. James will take us inside the country kitchen to see the wood-burning stove where biscuits and pies were baked and vegetables from the garden were canned for the winter. We'll also see the dog trot porch, find out the various ways water was collected, and see how laundry day took place. Thanks for watching Painting and Travel. We love having you with us.
For more information about painting and travel with Roger and Sarah Bansemer, visit paintingandtravel.com.